Here's my promise to you. By the end of this class, you'll learn a bulletproof process for hiring top performing sales reps with real questions that you can ask to uncover if someone is actually a good candidate. So many times, founders hire and hope. They hire salespeople, they cross their fingers, close their eyes, and hope that they work out. And what happens when they don't? The founder sometimes says, gosh, did I hire the wrong person? Are our leads bad? Does our script suck? Is our product not desirable? Am I a bad leader? All these questions arise. Hiring is a piece of the puzzle that'll help you feel confident that you're bringing in the right people. And again, by the end of this class, you are going to have a framework to actually follow. Real quick, couple bullets on me in case you've never met me before. My name is Kyle Vamvouris. I've worked with over 70 B2B software and service companies, helping them build a repeatable sales process. If you followed me for any period of time, you know I take a very data-driven approach to running sales teams. So it's a really focus on the data, using the data to optimize your sales process. I've written 3 Amazon best-selling books. One is on cold outreach called Cold to Committed. The other one is on how to run a sales development team called the Sales Development Framework. And the third one is called 16 Steps to Repeatable Sales. That covers how to build a repeatable sales process. And that's for B2B SaaS or service companies. It works equally as well. And then finally here, I've helped our clients sell over 100 million in software and services, over 280 million in money raised across the customers I've worked with that are venture backed. And I've trained over 1,000 salespeople. So I've been around the block. I've been in board meetings as somebody who runs teams when things are going well and when things are going poorly. I've been a rep on the front line, working my ass off, trying to get deals closed, and everywhere in between. So I've had almost every position you can have in the sales department. So I'm here to help and give you the tools that I have found effective, not only for me and the teams I've run, but also the people that I've worked with. There's one main problem when it comes to hiring, and that is if you hire the wrong person for your sales role, you're going to waste time, money, and you'll kill your culture. There's 3 poisons of a sales team that I often talk about. The first is that the individual reps don't know what they have to do to be successful. The second is the leadership team doesn't know how to use the data to enable the reps with what they need to do on a daily basis to be successful. And then the third one is there's a culture where poor performance is tolerated. Hiring influences all of these, but specifically that culture piece. The sales culture is so important, but often neglected. We treat it like we treat other roles, almost as if it's labor being done. And yes, there's a job to do. There's clear structure to that job, but there's an emotional component to sales that's pretty unique. I think it does apply to other departments. It's just very obvious in the sales role, and hiring is a big piece of the puzzle to make sure that it goes well. There's 4 components from my view on hiring top performers. The first is having a clear ideal candidate profile. The best way to ensure that the salesperson is going to be successful is by hiring the right salesperson. And this is a 2-way street. I want to make sure we're the right organization for that rep to thrive. And I also want to make sure that that rep is the right person to fit within our organization so we can thrive. It's a 2-way street. That's how it works. Salespeople are an investment. You give them $5, they give you 15. Right? And we want to make sure that's going to work for all parties involved. The second thing is what we call the SPARC candidate evaluation framework. When you have a sense of your ideal candidate, then you need to identify or you need to evaluate candidates that are coming through to make sure that they align with the ideal candidate profile, but also have some other characteristics that are going to enable them to be successful. We'll walk through that. Then I'm going to show you a structured interview process. It's very important. Now we have a structured interview process that we always follow. So that way we're not being biased with some candidates over others. And then finally here, I'm going to give you some interview questions. Okay, I'm going to give you my favorite ones. There's infinite interview questions. Google a bunch of them. They're all probably pretty good. These are the ones that I like the most. All right, we're going to start with the ideal candidate profiler. Here's what it looks like. Very nice document, right? I'm going to walk through the whole thing and really tell you when and how you should be using this. So when is at the very beginning. Before you hire a rep, you need a clear understanding of what that rep is going to look like. So you can see we have it split into 2 parts. We have skills and then we have attributes. And what I'm going to do here is zoom it in so you can actually see it. Would that be kind? That's what my son says. Is that kind? Okay, skills and attributes. Let's start with skills here. Sales motion. You see I have SMB, mid-market, enterprise. You can highlight, underline, whatever you want to do for whichever experience you feel is most suited for you. Here's what I recommend. You should be hiring sales reps that have a history of selling into a similar market that you sell into to similar people that you sell into, selling a similar product or service that you sell. Now, as you scale and you have a more mature sales organization, I think it's okay to hire people outside of that core group. In fact, I would encourage it. I think hiring people that have a lot of the intangibles but might not have the experience, but you can train them and they're so good in these other areas that they're going to be your top performers. That happens all of the time. Early on is not the time to do that. So you're going to have to weigh this for yourself. But let's say we're looking for people who've sold into mid-market, and let's say it's a marketing automation tool. Product type, what type of product have they sold before? Marketing automation in the example we're going to walk through. Personas that they've sold to, if we're selling a marketing automation tool, we're probably selling to CMOs, directors of marketing. Maybe marketing managers are involved in the buying decision. Maybe even the CEO is, if it's a big enough purchase, right? You want to map out the types of people that they have had experience selling to in the past. And also, because it's a similar product or service, then they can speak the language to those people in that context. That's the big shortcut, by the way. Next is verticals. Which verticals? Like, do they sell into financial tech companies? Do they sell into healthcare? Do they sell into insurance companies, right? What's the type of verticals that they have actually sold into? Another shortcut here. I say this about salespeople all the time. I want my sales reps to be able to go to a local meetup group with 15 people in the role that they sell to, have conversations, spend the afternoon there, and no one know they're a salesperson because they speak the language so well. That's the sign of a great salesperson. Having that vertical experience is going to shortcut that quite a bit. And then what kind of prospecting experience do they have? Inbound, outbound? Very important that if you're expecting them to do outbound, that they've done it before. Unless your process is so dialed in that you think you can train anybody on it, you should really look for somebody with that experience. Inbound as well. If you're hiring an account executive, right, which is kind of what we've been talking through here. If you're hiring an account executive and they have no experience doing their own outbound and managing a pipeline, that's tough. That amount of time management is tough. So you want to make sure that you're aligned on that. If it's an SDR, same type of thing. And then sales tools. What tools do they need to be familiar with? For the most part, I'm fine with this. Like, I don't really have many requirements, but sometimes there are sales tools that you use really extensively and they're detailed and you want to make sure they have the experience. And then other for the different things that you want. On the right-hand side, we have the attributes. Motivation. Are they more career motivated or more money motivated? So you might be selling an SMB product that's high volume, high pace. We're closing on one call. You might want somebody really money motivated. And that person just wants to make as much money as humanly possible and close as many deals as humanly possible. Or maybe you want somebody more career motivated, maybe somebody who can help you build out the process a little bit without sacrificing on the skills department. Then you might move to career. Generally, at least in my experience, I try to hover towards the middle here. I want somebody who sees a future for their career, but also is motivated enough by money to live in the short term as well. But every organization is a bit different, so you can fluctuate a little bit. Adaptability, somebody who's very comfortable in a stable environment or somebody who's very adaptable. If you're earlier stage and things change a lot, then we probably want somebody more on the adaptable side. But if you have something where it's like, hey, I just need somebody to come in and do this work. I need to hire an SDR. I want to making 100 cold calls a day, every single day, and booking 2 appointments per day. Okay, great. Let's make sure we have somebody very stable, right? Because you have the systems and that you need. Next is experience. Someone more junior, someone more senior. By the way, this is also going to affect the cost, right? Generally, the more senior, the more expensive it's going to be. So you want someone more junior, more senior. For example, for me, when I hire SDRs, I want junior. I hire SDRs fresh out of college. I'm not a huge fan of hiring SDRs with experience. And if you have any questions about that, definitely let me know. I'm happy to dive into more detail. Okay, network here. Do they have a large network? So maybe you're selling to big enterprises. You want somebody with a book of business or at least a book of contacts, or does not really matter all of that much. So you build this out, right? You put the little dot where it's supposed to go. And then as you're meeting with candidates, you score them based on your ideal candidate profile. This is the screening part that we should be doing in the very beginning of the interview process. Okay, we're going to talk about evaluating candidate fit in a minute here, but I really want you to understand that this is for qualifying if somebody should even be in our interview process. So I would give this to whoever's doing the first call and make sure that they check all of these boxes, right? Okay, so let's go back to where we were. Okay, so that was the ideal candidate profiler. I'm going to give this to you. You fill this out for every role that you're hiring for. Next, we're going to talk about SPARC. This is an evaluation framework that we use to determine if a candidate meets the expectations that we have. So there's two big components here. Well, I guess technically there's 6, but there's two big ones. First is background. What's their background? That's kind of what we were talking about earlier, right? Making sure that they have a background selling into a similar industry or vertical, selling to similar buyer personas or the buyer persona, similar product, right? That kind of stuff. But then there's actually SPARC. So this is the second big category that has 5 components. First is success, which is a past track record that they have hit their number before. The greatest predictor of future success is past success. If you talk to somebody who's never had big wins, they're probably not going to have big wins magically in the future, right? So I want to make sure that we have a track record of success. The second is positivity. How optimistic, how positive is this person? I generally, as a leader especially, highly weight positivity. I want optimists on my team, but that's not always the case. Sometimes in more technical sale, you need somebody who's much more critical, and you need somebody with that critical eye. I don't think you want somebody negative, right? So don't get me wrong there, but positivity might not be as heavily weighted for you, and I'll get to that in a minute. Next is articulation. Are they able to clearly articulate themselves written and verbally? Very important, right? Because we're using a lot of different channels to interact with our customers today, or our potential customers. And then finally, we have relevance. How relevant is their background? Okay, that's the SPARC framework. Oh, excuse me. One more, coachability, of course. Let's stick with our acronym here. Coachability is the last one. How coachable are they? More experience, you might want somebody a little less on the coachability scale, but you still want to hire coachable people, right? So I don't want you to think there's like a 0 and then a 10. It's really like, hey, I want somebody who's definitely coachable, is open to new ideas, but they've been doing this a long time, versus somebody early in their career. I want super coachable. Hey, I'm green. I'm a blank slate. Fix me, right? Or make me great. That's what I want. Okay, so let's actually go through the SPARC framework here. As you can see here, I have a description of everything I just read out to you. So you can have this and it's all right there. Now what you're going to do is you're going to start by filling out the important scale section. What does this do? What this does is allow us to apply weighting to each category. Now, what are you making this out of? Is it 1 to 5, 1 to 10, 1 to 100? You pick. Okay, so you choose your scale, and what it's going to do is going to sum it up, and based on that sum, it'll weight things properly. So let's talk about this. Let's say for the first one here, this is for S, right? Because it's above the S right here. Let's say for S, which is past track record for success, I want a 5. I want somebody with a huge track record for success. If it's a fresh out of college person, I might put that in as a 3. They might not have a lot of work experience, right? Okay, the next one here is positivity. Maybe I have this at a 3. Maybe I don't need someone who's pure bubbly optimist. I need somebody a little more critical who's going to be able to speak to technical buyers a bit better in that example. Next, we have articulation. I want someone to be able to clearly articulate themselves. You might be thinking, well, why would I ever not want that? It's not that you don't want it. So I want to repeat that point. It's how you're valuing that as a category. If you're not super worried about someone's ability to articulate themselves, written and verbal, as much as you would be if you're hiring them for a different role, you'll weight this lower. So for example, maybe you're hiring an SDR right out of college, or maybe it's a very transactional sale and you're going to hire folks and maybe they're selling to somebody who isn't very articulate themselves, right? You care about that less. It's not a binary thing. It's a scale. So we're going to put out of 5. I'm making mine out of 5 for each one of these. So this will be a 5. Next, we have relevance. How relevant is their experience? Well, let's say we're hiring somebody and we need more, like somebody with real experience. And then the final one here is coachability. Maybe I'm hiring someone more experienced. I'm less worried about coachability. So you can see our sum is 31. Now here's what's happening. As you're evaluating candidates, right here, you are going to score them between 1 and 4. And here's the scale. A 4 is the best. It's the top 10% of people that you know for that trait. A 3 is top 20%. 2 is top 50%. And 1 is bottom 50%. So 1, not good. 4, excellent. That's the scale that we use. It's based on top grading. As you can see here, we have our first candidate. That's Adam Callahan. And we see our first metric here, success. 3. Medium, like top 20% of people with track records of success. Their positivity was a 2. It's like, you know what? They're in like top 50, but I wouldn't say that they're outstandingly positive or very optimistic people. Their articulation is a 4. So like this person, they're sharp. They know how to articulate themselves. Their relevance is a 1. So they just don't have that much experience in our industry. And their coachability is really high. It's a 4. Well, that puts our average here of 2.76. We only move forward with averages of 3 and above. Okay, that's the rule. So this person we would not move forward with because they didn't get the average score. And it's not an average of this. It's a weighted average of this against how important you find that trait. That's the unique part about this. The reason why we do it this way is it takes the bias out of it. You know what? Not the most relevant experience, but I just really like this guy. I just think Adam's awesome, right? We start to change a little bit how important we find these different categories, which makes us, or which can lead to us making a bad hire. Okay, now let's look at Jessica here. We have a 3 in success, a 4 in positivity. She's super optimistic and positive. A 3 in articulation, a 4 in relevance. So a lot of experience in our industry with our product. And then coachability is a 3. It's a little less on the coachability. But here's the key here. That relevance is heavily weighted. And you know what else was pretty high weighted? Was articulation. So, and she's still in a good place there. Less important to us was positivity, but she's very high on that. And if you do the weighted average here, she's at a 3.38, which means, yes, we would move forward in our interview process. And I'll explain when we apply this, but very important that you evaluate all of the candidates on a consistent scale. If not, different biases come into play, which can hurt your ability to hire the best candidate. Alrighty, so let's go back to the main presentation here. That was SPARC. And let's talk about background a little bit. We've talked about it at a high level, but I want to go a little bit deeper here. They've sold in your industry. Really helpful. They've sold to your specific buyer persona or group of buyers. They've sold a similar product or similar selling motion, and they have a history of high performance. That's generally the 4 things I'm looking for in somebody's background. Now, the more sophisticated, the more mature your sales department is, the less you might care about industry or buyer persona, selling experience, or selling motion experience. In my experience, early on, hiring somebody who checks a lot of those boxes is a big shortcut to performance. But to take this a little bit a step further here, if you're at a place where you're like, hey, they might not have industry experience, but they have all these other intangibles that I think would be a great culture fit, and they work very hard, they have all of these other characteristics that I really like, you might sacrifice that to get that person in there because they're going to have a big impact on the organization. So you make that decision based on where you're at. Now let's talk about the interview process itself. I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly because I want you to be able to morph this to your own. But let me give you a high level overview of what I expect from an interview process. So the first thing is they submit a resume. Okay, we get a resume that comes in. And what I recommend doing is emailing them a test email. It's a screening test. That email at the end of it, you say, thank you, we got your application. We'll be reaching out to you shortly. P.S. Please reply to this email and change the subject line to your name so that you pop up on top of our inbox. Anybody who doesn't reply, you don't even look at the resume. This will filter out 50% of the resumes that you get. You want people who take that extra step, that extra attention to detail. Next, if they reply, we review the resume. If it seems like it's a potential fit, we set up a phone. We send an email to schedule the phone screening. We conduct the phone screening. This is where we start looking at the ideal candidate profiler and making sure that they fit that ideal candidate profile. If we're moving on, we're going to send them a written exercise. This helps us understand how well they do written, right? And gives them a little homework. The written exercise generally is, we'll ask them to find 3 potential customers for our product or service and write a paragraph. This isn't a long exercise. Write a little paragraph on why they think that company would be a good fit for our solution. just by looking at stuff. It's not complicated, and I also am not expecting them to go really deep with our solution. They have no idea what our solution is just from the website. But from that phone screen and from doing research on the website, they should know enough to be able to say, hey, I think these 3 companies could be a good fit. Here's why I think that. That's all it is. If they reply, you're going to evaluate it. And if it's good, then you'll move on. Now, real quick here, is it good? I have rejected 1 candidate from their responses. They almost always pass this. This is a little hurdle to show you that they care enough about the position and also give you an idea of how they articulate themselves written. So most of them will end up being good. Next, we go into position. Is an SDR and AE position? AE, we're going to send them a scheduling email to schedule a mock presentation. We do a mock sales presentation before we do traditional interviews. Then they conduct that mock presentation with you there. And they're not trying to sell your solution or your service. They are trying to sell something they're very comfortable selling. That's the key. I want to see them at their best. I'm not trying to get them to learn my product and try to sell our product. I want them to sell something they're very comfortable with. If it's an SDR, we're just going to go right to schedule the main the main scheduling email will go out so we can schedule the main interview. Why don't I do any mock cold calls or anything with SDRs? The reason why is because I generally hire people right out of college, and I haven't found that doing mock cold calls are all that helpful for me to be able to determine if they're going to be good at cold calling or not. So I don't do them. And I figure it out in other ways through the interview process, through the stuff that I've already showed you. Also, how they articulate themselves in the interview will tell you a lot, and I'll train the rest. If you're really uncomfortable, then you can add that there, but I don't. Also, SDRs get hired pretty quick generally, so I want to move a little bit quicker. Okay, then we conduct the main interview. This is, once they get past this, if they're an AE, once they get past this, if they're an SDR, we conduct the main interview, and this is where we're applying the SPARC framework. I usually recommend 3 people from your team interviewing them. Fill out the SPARC framework, so that way each person gives them a score in each of the categories, and then do they hit our weighted average between 3 and 4? Yes, we ask for references. We conduct reference checks. We make an offer. If the reference checks go well, negotiate, hire, and onboard. Reference checks, people ask me about this a lot. Generally, people give references that are positive. My framing for those reference checks is really to learn how that person works and how I can enable them to be more successful when they've worked with us. I have never personally rejected somebody after doing a reference check, but I've learned a lot about how they like to work that maybe they didn't tell me or I didn't realize earlier on, which helps me when I actually onboard that person. I know people who have rejected from reference checks because something weird popped up, but I haven't personally had it, but we still do them because I do find it very valuable to learn what it's like working with those people. Okay, let's move on to interview questions. I'm going to go through the interview questions that I personally like asking. There are thousands of interview questions you can Google and get a whole bunch of them, but these are my favorite. The first, how much time do you spend cultivating customer relationships versus hunting for new clients? What's the philosophy behind the breakdown? I want somebody who knows how to manage their day, but can articulate why they do what they do. Somebody who's thinking beyond just, I do thing 1, I do thing 2. I don't want a robot. I want somebody who's dynamic, who's thoughtful. This helps me understand that. What do you think our company/sales organization could do better? After talking to some people in the organization, they may have a sense of this, and I'd be curious to hear it from their perspective. Maybe they saw something on the website. It also helps me understand if they're willing to give critical feedback. And my favorite response to this is someone who says, let me think about it. And they take a minute to really think through it and then give a real thoughtful answer based on their experience. Next, tell me about something interesting you may have learned recently. I like interesting people. I tend to hire characters. I want people with goofy personalities, who have interesting hobbies. I once hired somebody whose hobby was snow machine racing in Alaska. Grew up in Alaska. That was his hobby. Like, that's so cool to me. I've hired people who are big fans of Magic the Gathering. They like playing competitive card games. I like people with interesting backgrounds, and I like creating a little melting pot of those people. I think it's more fun. Okay. Have you ever had a losing streak? How did you turn it around? Again, I want to learn about their background. How do they handle challenges? When your back's against the wall, it looks like you're not going to hit your number. Some people will give 50% effort, guarantee that they fail, but at least they didn't try, so they protect their ego. I want people whose back's against the wall, they give 100%. They try even harder in spite of possibly failing. because that's the kind of person they are. That's the kind of person we want to hire. Next, we have explain the steps you take from beginning of the sales process to the very end. And this is clear. I have a process. I know what I'm doing. I don't just do what I'm told. I do what I'm told and what I know. And I understand the reason behind why I do things. Really, really good trait to have. This is my favorite one. Spoiler alert, my favorite one. And I'll be the third person in the interview for this one. And I'll say, you have spoken with person A and person B. I'm curious from your perspective, what do you think they will be most excited about you as a candidate? And what do you think their biggest concern will be? I've been asking this question for a very long time. It's my favorite interview question. I learn so much about the candidate when I ask this question, so I keep asking it. Here's what ends up happening. First, they get quiet. They're like, oh, that's a good question. They think. That's a great sign. I want somebody who's thoughtful, right? So they think. And then they'll respond with, I spoke to person A. I think that they're going to like X about me, and they're going to be concerned about Y. Here's why I think I should be able to overcome that concern. Boom, boom, boom. Now with person B, same thing. Sometimes they'll only tell you the positives or they'll only tell you the negatives. And then I'll remind them, well, what do you think they'll like about it? Okay. The idea here is I start to understand them as people. Are they comfortable enough in their own skin to look you in the eye and say, I think they're not going to like this, but here's my response to that. How do they think through a question like this? Very, very helpful. It lets me understand their self-awareness and also how they're able to articulate themselves even under a little pressure and with a tough question. Okay, so why does this all work? Well, the first one is it removes feelings from the sales process. The second reason is candidates can't hide weaknesses. And then the third one is you get multiple opinions. You're working with other people, you're on the same foundation, you get multiple opinions. This is why it's important that you have a strong process for hiring sales folks. So let me go to the top and I'm going to start answering some questions here. First time. Will this benefit the flip side of high performing sales exec looking to get hired? Depends on what part you were talking about, but yeah, I mean, high performing sales reps that are looking to get hired, if you're a top performing sales rep, you're very picky about the company you're going to go to because you want to make sure you're going to make as much money as possible. So you do more research. You're willing to jump through a bit more hoops because you want to go to a company that you determine I can sell the shit out of this product, right? So absolutely, this is great for high performers. What would be your top advice to make hiring managers buy into and adopt the process? Well, hiring managers should want to hire the best performing candidates, right? So they should be following a process in order to do that. If they feel like their current process is getting them top performers every time, then don't change it, right? But if you feel like we're not getting the best candidates, then we need to try a different process. And if they're going to be hiring for the first time, they should be more than open to follow a process. It's not a hard process to follow. It's a process, right? It's not complicated. How does this advice change when making a first hire? I am an SDR leader who has been the SDR team and just got budget for a hire. Cool. That's awesome. It doesn't change. Do the exact same thing. And you're hiring SDRs. So let's get a whole bunch of resumes in, do the email. So you can set it up in the applicant tracking software. Most of them allow you to do this, where when they apply, like a minute later, 5 minutes later, they'll get an email and saying, thank you for your application, blah, blah, blah. P.S. Reply back, change the subject line title to your name. So that way you pop up on top of our inbox. When they do that, those are the only people you evaluate, follow the rest of the process from there. What are your thoughts on candidates that job hop multiple roles in less than 12 months? I saw a study. I'll tell you what I want to think and then what I actually think. I saw a study, I think it was even done by Harvard. I think it was like in Harvard Business or something, about job hoppers having no impact on sales reps performance or tenure. My experience is it kind of does. So if somebody has a lot of hopping, I ask a bunch of questions about it, try to understand their reasonings for changing jobs and all of that. So I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I don't use it as a hard disqualifier. It's kind of like a big yellow flag. It's like a yellow flag that's kind of turned into red. So what is that, orange? So yeah, not a biggest fan of it, but apparently it doesn't matter. Look, if you're early stage, I don't think you should hire somebody who's hopped a bunch of jobs. Yeah, I really don't. If you're a little later stage, maybe. Maybe. I find that some people really need a lot of structure to be successful, and job hoppers tend to go to earlier stage companies where they didn't have a lot of structure, and they'll generally point the finger at the company, which, by the way, warranted for sure. um, what are your thoughts on? What are your recommendations for sourcing candidates? LinkedIn, Indeed, and any groups? We always use LinkedIn, and we've tested Indeed. It just hasn't. Well, we just don't get the quality of candidates that we need. So all of our recruiting. So we do some recruiting for our customers. We're not a recruiting firm, but our clients have to hire reps, and who they hire matters to us because we work closely with them, with the founders and the reps. So we'll actually go and recruit for them. All of that we do through LinkedIn. That's the only one I would consider. Group wise, I'm not sure. We don't use any groups for that. As a newer company still developing our sales process, we are looking to hire someone who can come in and play a large role in developing the process. The ideal individual is likely still working. What is some advice to approaching ideal candidates that is currently employed? Great question. Actually, this goes back to Clyde, your question too. You can do this too. Find your competitor, search all of their salespeople, and just reach out to them and say like, hey, I looked at your background. I thought you'd be a good fit for our company. And I'm really trying to hire somebody who's a top performer and wants to build this organization from scratch. Are you open to having a conversation about it? And you want to like tie in the benefits, because what you actually want is you want somebody who's performing really well, wants to be a VP, but there's no VP on the roadmap here. Right? Maybe the current VP has been there for a bit, or they just hired a different VP, and that person's like, gosh, I'm probably going to be stuck in this role for another 5 years, and I really want to move into a VP role. Them going to a smaller company, even if there's a little pay cut there, makes a lot of sense for their career. And that goes, if you go to the profiler, right? We had motivation, career, or money. What do you like to do instead of role play when hiring SDRs? I don't. I skip right to the main interview. I don't find the role play is very valuable for me. If you're concerned about it, you can do it. If you're hiring an SDR with experience, I would probably role play. I don't like hiring SDRs with experience. This is my opinion. My opinion is the SDR is an entry-level position where the people taking that position should desire to move into an account executive role. That's my opinion. Those are the best SDRs I've worked with. So I do not like SDRs who've been SDRs for a long time. I have nothing against them as people. I realize some folks are fine with the SDR role. It's just not the type of candidates I want to hire in our organization. I want candidates who want to move into an account executive role, especially because I think part of the benefit, not the main benefit. The main benefit is actually reducing the cost of customer acquisition. But a secondary big benefit of having an SDR team is to have a feeder system for your account executives. Thoughts on adding in video submissions as early step in candidate filtering process after reviewing resumes? You can. I don't, but you can. I've seen people do this. I don't find them that valuable. If I'm hiring overseas or near shore, I do. Any recommendations for writing exercise in SDR or sales interviews? Yes, I do the same one every time. And if you look up that blog post, it's Vouris. Google Vouris hiring salespeople. But what I recommend doing is telling the candidate, I want you to find 3 companies that you think would be good prospects for us, and write a short 3-sentence, 5-sentence paragraph on why you think that they're a good fit. That's what I generally do. What do I do if I'm hiring but I don't have enough applicants? You run ads, or you need to do more direct outreach. I like direct outreach a lot if you have the bandwidth for it. If you can reach out to 5 or 10 potential candidates every single day, you'll get folks to talk to. So that's what I would do. I would look at all of your competitors, look at all of their salespeople or former salespeople, and I would just reach out to 10 of them a day, or do a big push one day. And that's what I would do to get a bunch more, or run ads. Cool. Well, that looks like all of the questions. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, never hesitate to reach out. It's Kyle@Vouris.com. Thanks again, and we'll talk soon. Bye.